Some big developments are underway in India's foreign relations and international affairs, many of which will have implications for India. In the last few weeks, we've seen a number of developments of this nature. The biggest one, perhaps, has been the looming trade war and tariff war between the US and China, which is also having some spillover effect for India. Recently, India announced retaliatory tariffs against the United States of roughly $240 million, so a small but not insignificant amount, and has said that they'll come into force on August 4th. Which has given some time now for negotiations underway. This is in response to a first round of sanctions that were announced, of tariffs that were announced earlier this year by the Trump administration, primarily against steel and what they see as steel and aluminum dumping in the United States by a number of actors, including India. But the brunt of the focus has really been on China, which is being much more affected by this looming trade competition between the US. Involving the US. India, of course, is not exempt. We've now seen retaliatory tariffs. We've seen Commerce Minister Suresh Prabhu go to Washington recently, as well as a reciprocal visit by a US trade delegation here to India. But we'll have to see now how the two sides can come to some kind of accommodation when it comes to trade between the two countries. If trade is being one area of US-India relations that is not seeing a lot of good news lately, two other issues have come up of late. One is the possibility of India being affected by sanctions related to Russia. The US Congress recently passed legislation last year which could affect any country that engages in major deals with Russia. India is certainly subject to them. There's a possibility of India now buying defense equipment from Russia that would certainly allow these sanctions to be imposed. Negotiations also are underway to see if a carve-out can be created for India in US legislation. And Iran is a further factor that might lead to some problems in India-US relations. In the near future, the US withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal means that Indian entities which do trade and engage in economic activity with Iran might be affected. If these are all the negatives, I think some things are happening on the positive end of US-India relations. While 2+2 dialogue involving the foreign and defense ministers has been postponed now for the third time due to scheduling issues. And obviously this had been a lot of build-up had gone into this, and so it is it is certainly postponing progress in India-US relations. This would have been the first time, though, that such a meeting would have happened. We can expect something like this to happen by the end of the year or perhaps next year. That being said, a lot has been happening in the India-US defense relationship, which I think tells a very different story. Largely of symbolic importance. The US recently renamed its Pacific Command as the Indo-Pacific Command, focusing on the Indian Ocean, which falls largely under, most of the Indian Ocean falls under what was known as the US Pacific Command. They're starting to put a bit more detail into their free and open Indo-Pacific strategy. But all of this in some ways masks some of the more tangible developments that have been taking place. We've seen greater trilateral cooperation. There's now a dialogue at the ministerial level with the India, US, and Japan. The India, US, and Afghanistan have been coordinating more and more on an official level. We've seen the resurrection of a quadrilateral dialogue involving India, the US, Japan, and Australia. Bilateral India-US defense agreements have also been progressing. Last year, a logistics agreement was finally concluded, as was an agreement that enables and facilitates helicopter operations between the Indian and US militaries. Discussions for a communications agreement have been underway. They may be concluded very soon, but there's still a few issues that need to be ironed out. In terms of exercises, high-level India-US joint exercises take place. The Indian Navy recently participated in RIMPAC, which is the largest US military exercise that takes place every year. Air Force exercises are expected later in the near future as well. And more importantly, I think we'll see the first tri-service amphibious exercises involving India and the United States. And there's really only one precedent for this, which is an exercise that India does with Russia. So this, I think, represents a major breakthrough as well. And finally, there's some movement also on India defense trade as well. The US recently approved the sale of helicopters, attack helicopters to India. And for the first time, we're talking about the possibility of the sale of armed drones as well. So all of this, despite the postponement of the 2+2 dialogue, represents some very concrete changes that have taken place in the India-US defense agreement. And finally, another major event that took place was the visit of Danny Faure, the leader of the Seychelles. And the Seychelles is actually a very important country for India's overall Indian Ocean strategy. They signed 6 agreements. India has offered military aid in the form of an aircraft. But it's also a long-standing defense arrangement. India has for many years been sending a destroyer to survey and do reconnaissance in the special economic zone of the Seychelles. More recently, they've been sending naval aircraft to do this. The big issue that remains outstanding is the negotiations for the development of a naval facility of some kind on Assumption Island in the Seychelles. And this has been, while the agreement has been renegotiated now multiple times, it still faces some opposition from the political opposition in the Seychelles. So while Mr. Faure has backed it at various points of times, it remains subject to local politics. And of course, this is an issue that India will have to deal with, not just with the Seychelles, but with other countries in the Indian Ocean region, as it tries to implement its security policy in the broader region.